started. I'm Andrew Stewart. For those that don't know me, I'm the building commissioner here in Marshfield. Obviously, we are all here because we're having an update to our stretch energy code. Marshfield especially is a stretch code community, a green community, so we do abide by the stretch code here in Marshfield. And I know everybody's had a lot of questions. We've been presented with a lot of questions. We don't necessarily have all the answers, but Julie Johnson came, was asking me some questions. A couple of you guys were asking me questions, and Andrew and Chris here from Home Energy Raiders, they have offered to give us a little presentation on the update to the stretch energy code, and we're going to do a little question and answer. Dave Carlo, our building inspector, is here too. He's gone to a couple of meetings, district meetings with the other building officials, the state building official, and done some training on the updates. So hopefully we'll be able to give you guys a good presentation on what the updates are, what that means for planning and carrying out your projects, and then any questions that we can help answer or try to help you get the answer to going forward. That's kind of what we're here for today. So I really appreciate everybody coming by. This is a great opportunity to get to know everybody and get some answers to some of these important code updates. So Andrew and Chris, appreciate it, and take it away. Thanks.
Thanks everyone for coming. My name is Chris Mazzola. I'm currently the production manager at Home Energy Raiders. I've been there for 18 years. I'm also the president of the Home Energy Raiders System Alliance. We have a sister company, New England Air Barrier, just for full disclosure, because we'll talk about that later. Yeah, I've been a HERS Raider for too long. A lot of you guys have been builders for too long. We currently have 18 employees. We do about 1,600 HERS ratings a year. Predominantly low-rise, single-family, duplex, bare code minimum stuff. We do we do res checks and com checks, manual J's. We have a number of lead for homes projects going on right now. We do some passive house. The entire company is going through a passive house multifamily training next week. We do Article 37s. We do Berto reports for multifamilies in Boston, and we do alternative energy credits. So I always find it hard to start these. As many as we've done, we do about 6 a week. And as hard as it is to get these talks rolling, I think it's as hard to get new adoptions on the building codes rolling. We're pretty simple guys. We've had years of building experience, years of being energy modelers and being on that side. Essentially what the new building code is trying to do, the IACC, in the stretch codes, in this opt-in code that's coming. The state of Massachusetts is really trying to kickstart a global climate change, decarbonization of residential buildings. And that's gonna be, throughout New England and across the country, and then, the DOE has hopes that, it'll be a global movement. It is in some aspects, but I can say, and I'll say it again on another slide, it's a little unfair that, this burden has been put on the shoulders of residential home builders in Massachusetts to start this. I'm a pretty honest guy. I think I'm a pretty upfront guy. I think, the codes moved, a little too fast. And I understand the goal. And I understand that we're trying to save a planet, but there's market aspects too that we need to deal with, and the ability to actually sell the homes that we're building is kind of an issue. So I always start off with the bad news. Is this clear? Can everyone see that? Is that all right? Okay. So I always start with the bad news. There was no concurrency period for this IECC. As of January 1st, 2023, state of Massachusetts adopted the 2021 ICC, which included the 2021 IECC, and any stretch code amendments that went along with. Obviously, any stretch code amendments will affect the way that you build and price your homes. It is what it is at this point. There is an overall push to remove fossil fuels from residential building. In one of the next slides, we'll talk about the five laws that were passed in Massachusetts to essentially decarbonize the entire residential housing stock by 2050. It will be virtually impossible for the state to become entirely electric, just because there are sections of the industry, sections of building, commercial side especially, that you just cannot convert to all electric. There's many high-rise buildings in Boston, for instance, that are all they are all gas right now. You just can't. The infrastructure can't support that type of retrofit. But for the single-family market and new building, new multis, the goal is to go all electric. So, just the facts, no politics here. Most 301, is that right? 301 towns in Massachusetts are now stretch code. There's 5 parts of the stretch code to become a green community. I'm sorry, there's 5 parts of the Green Communities Act. One of them, the last one, is the stretch code, the adoption of the stretch code. There's 3 different laws that were passed the end of last year that clearly lay out these target dates, 2025, 2030, and 2050. And essentially what those mean, those are the target dates for decarbonizing different sectors of the building industry. So 2030 will be the all-electric residential moratorium, where any house built, any house permitted post July 1st, 2030 will have to be all electric. So air source heat pumps for heating, cooling, and hot water. By 2050, the state has a goal that the entire residential housing stock, existing and newly constructed, will be all electric. And essentially what they're going to try to do is as your gas equipment comes to end of life and it can no longer be repaired, it will have to be changed out to an electric air source heat pump for heating, cooling, hot water. So there will be, I assume there will be some stragglers, toward the 2050 mark that still have gas. But eventually the whole state does want to decarbonize, and they want to be all electric by that date. I don't know if anyone has a question. I'm not entirely sure the infrastructure in Massachusetts is ready for that. Our electrical infrastructure now, our grid, is designed to flow energy from the plant to a house. It's not really designed to go both ways. So that's partly why the major utility companies are okay with the decarbonizing and the elimination of gas to some of these homes, because the maintenance of these and the upgrade to the grid is gonna ride them through for the next 25, 30 years. So yeah, these 3 bills were all passed last year. They all reference the same dates. They all reference the decarbonization of the state. There's different funding opportunities. We'll get to that in a second too. There's different rebates and incentives that are going to be become available through the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022, and that's good. There'll be some incentives that'll take a little bit of the sting off of what you guys are going to have to do for over the next couple of years. So, we'll do the quick highlights. And so any home permitted as of today that has fossil fuels, oil, propane, or natural gas has to get to a HERS 52. An all-electric home permitted today, air source heat pumps for heating, cooling, and hot water, needs to be a 55, still maintains a 55. If you have fossil fuels and solar, you get to 55. If you do all electric and you have solar, your HERS score is a 60. Every new house is required to be EV ready, electric vehicle ready. That's required just to have a 2-gang outlet. It doesn't have to be wired. 2-gang outlet in the garage, or the closest corner, exterior corner, closest to the driveway, and a single breaker labeled in the panel. Doesn't have to be there. It just has to be an open spot for it for an eventual installation. HVAC duct leakage testing is required now for all duct systems, regardless of whether they're in the envelope or not. That is an unfortunate aspect for us, because a lot of the duct systems that were inside the thermal envelope, up until this code iteration, we could exempt and we didn't have to test. Our philosophy for the last 18 years was we tested every system anyways, because we wanted to make sure that the system that was installed, you were getting your money's worth, that you were actually getting what you were paying for, that you were getting a code compliant duct system. We didn't want to see a forced air duct system in, 2,000 square foot house that had, 15% duct leakage. That's just not, you're gonna end up with distribution issues, cold rooms. And it's not because the system was undersized, it was just because the velocity of air going to that end of the run just wasn't there. And, in a lot of cases, the solution to that was always just put in a bigger air handler or a bigger condenser and just make it bigger. But when in fact you probably really need to make it smaller and just duct seal your distribution system. HERS ratings are also, HERS ratings are required. This is a big one for the guys in the room that do additions and renovations. Additions over 1,000 square feet, or that encompass over 50% of the home being altered, which would be a level 3 alteration, would have to meet the code R value. So a renovation over 1,000 square feet, or an addition to a house over 1,000 square feet, the whole house has to get HERS rated and brought to a 52.
And the 1,000 square feet is floor space, or is it?
Yeah, addition floor area, not surface. Yeah. Yep, definitely, good question. Yep. So for the architects in the room, a lot of 998 square additions, please. All right? Right? In phases, right? Because the town doesn't lose money if you do it in phases. Right? So just keep that in mind. If you can break it up, break it up. It's going to make your lives a lot easier.
And on the phases, is there a look back in the lot, so that they can say if you did the phases within 3 years, you better now comply?
I know you.
Was that?
Is there a look back feature in the law about doing it in phases, that if you do it within 3 years or a time frame and you exceed 1,000, now you have to go back and comply?
I would imagine that they will probably want us to do the same thing that we do with the flood zone, and refer to like Appendix J, where any permits, any work done within a 1-year period is considered light work.
Okay.
I imagine it would be treated the same way as we treat like substantial improvements.
Yeah, it's usually the answer I get when I point to the inspector in the room. So, yeah, it's maybe.
But that's where the design phase too is where you might look at that, and a potential customer comes in like, oh, I got this 1,200 square foot addition I want to do, and they're not planning on touching their 100-year-old existing home and the current heating system and everything that's there. And say, hey, well, you may want to change this and try to make it a 950 square foot addition, because the cost to bring that whole old house up to a HERS 55 or 52 is probably going to be an additional $150,000, $200,000 on top of whatever the cost of the addition is. For most people that are just looking to do an addition, that completely blows the budget.
Yeah,
Just clarifying, this is for stretch communities only?
nope.
This is for everybody?
Mhm. Yeah, yep, yep. The base code towns, if you don't hire a HERS rater, you're onto the prescriptive side. And that is, an R60 in the roof or the attic, some combination of R30 in the above grade walls, 19 on your foundation walls. And then you still need to hire someone to do a blower door, you still need to hire someone to do your duct test, you need to verify your ASHRAE 62.2 for ventilation. And there's no trade-off. So, the biggest value in hiring a HERS rater really is the value engineering of the project. It's looking at the plans before you start to build and say, all right, what's the bare minimum we have to do to get compliant? And then you go up from there. It's the expectation of the homeowner, the expectation of the architect, you guys as the builders. What do you want to produce? I mean, are you trying to just get to a 52.49? Because we can do that. We do it all the time. Andrew and I we talk to people all the time. We do 6 of these a week. I think every HERS rater probably across the country has a niche. We all fill a niche. There's raters that just do passive house. And those builders know way more about building science than the HERS rater that's working with them. And then you've got guys like us. And my business model always has been to get to as many homes as I can and make them just a little bit better. I don't want to save the planet one house at a time. I want to save the planet by touching 10,000 houses and make them a little bit better. If we model your house and we get you to a 52, or even a all electric, we get you to 55.49, compliant, all day long, maybe as cheap as you can build it, but that home is a D-. Like that's the bare minimum. And the question is, as a builder, do you want to build D- homes? Which is don't get me wrong, compared to what they build in Oklahoma, that's a goddamn good house. Right? But, can you market a B+ house? Can you sell a B+ house in Massachusetts? I don't know, I'm sure. But not if you want to build, any more than one a year. I don't know if you can do that. And that's where I think, choosing the HERS rater you work with, can make a difference. I don't push builders to do anything they don't want to do. I'm gonna model that building to the bare minimum, and then you're off to the races. And if you want to do exactly what I tell you have to do, and stick to that like glue, you'll pass at the end. But if you do anything better than that, it's all gravy. And that's when you start to build incentives and use these mass scorecards to model to market your homes. So let me get back. So starting July 1st, officially starting July 1st, towns can adopt the specialized stretch code, which essentially is a zero energy code. There's 4 towns that have already committed to adoption: Brookline, Cambridge, Somerville, and Watertown. There's a grace period. They can't actually start to enforce until about September, but these are the towns that are going to be leading the charge for decarbonization and low energy. These are the towns where the stretch code and the fear of building to the stretch code is going to cost you a lot of money. It is what it is. There's no question. And just so everyone knows, the 2024 IECC has already been signed and approved. And they're working, the DOE now is working on the 27 IECC. Not a whole lot of new changes. It's more of a grammatical, and they're just shifting some sections around, some subsections around. Very similar to when we adopted the 15. The 2015 was just a grammatical changes of the 12, and the same with the 18. There weren't really any big changes. So we're not looking for any big changes until we get to 2030. All right, what do we really need to know? What you really need to know is that the date that everyone keeps talking about is next year, 2024. So for the next 14 months, we're just looking for 52s and 55s. The big change, the homes that we're trying to get to by taking baby steps now, to incremental changes now, is to get you to 42. A code-built home today, so a 2,000 square foot colonial, basic colonial, 7 windows in the front, 5 in the back, a slider. With a traditional heating system, we can get to 55 pretty easy. Getting to 45 or 42, that's a leap. That changes. This is all electric. And we're looking at not just putting in a heat pump. We have to look at specific performances of heat pumps. The heating seasonal performance factors, the coefficients of performances, and balanced ventilation. That's going to be another huge one, is the performance of the balanced ventilation and how that was installed. So this is the chart that's in the building code. You know, it's mixed fuels by date. They are what they are. There's opportunities depending upon what you guys are willing to do. You know, with renewable energy, and Andrew will talk about renewables and how PV, photovoltaics, and solar panels affect your scores. But you know, we can go all the way up to a 75. It's definitely doable, but you know, it's where you want to put your money. So, you know, what is it all going to cost? I don't know. I tell people don't comment, don't say anything until we've done the preliminary model. We don't know. You know, Patrick can tell you, Andrew can tell you many times, we do subdivisions, production builders, where they built the same house on the right side of the road and the left side of the road. And depending upon the orientations of those homes, they score significantly different, 2 or 3 points, just because of the solar orientation and what that solar heat gain coefficient is of the predominant side, where the glazing is. There's a ton of DOE, Department of Energy, white papers and case studies out there that say all air source heat pumps and all electric homes are cheaper to build. And maybe, they could be, maybe, not always. We were just at a couple of homes this morning that aren't cheaper to live in, right? It's an all electric house. You know, without some sort of solar renewable energy, they are very efficient, don't get me wrong. They're going to use much less energy, but it's still an all-electric home, which is why there is this drive for renewable energies to be installed. But there's a ton of incentives out there. Mass Save will pay out up to $10,000 for a home, depending upon the kilowatt savings of a house. That's the traditional low-rise residential Mass Save program. Every house we do, we run through it to get, you know, whatever incentive we can get for the building. Typically, it covers our fee plus another couple $100. Mass Save renovations and additions maxes out at $10,000. If it's an all-electric house and you've converted from, you know, an old oil boiler to an air source heat pump, you automatically get $10,000 as your base. And then any thermal improvement you make to the building's envelope, you'll get that incentive as well. So that'll go up to about $20,000. Mass Save also has an all-electric home incentive. So if you build a house that has a blower door under 1.5 ACH, air source heat pumps for heating, cooling, and hot water, a balanced ventilation system, an ERV or an HRV. It has to be EV ready and PV ready. They'll give you $15,000. And if you can, if you want to wrap the entire thermal envelope in continuous insulation, so maybe like a R5 zip on the outside, spray foam the roof line, insulate, Thermax the inside of the foundation walls and under the slab, you can get $25,000. On top of these, there's alternative energy credits, totally separate, totally outside of the Mass Save scope. So any house that has an air source heat pump for heating and cooling can get about 65 cents. It may go up. This is a quarterly auction, similar to the SRECs for solar. It's gone up. We've seen it at 90, right? It kind of topped out at 90. It fluctuates. So last quarter it was 65, but I suspect it's going to go up. And then again, back in the IRA, some of the money you talked about earlier, there's these 45L tax credits. They were always traditionally $2,000. Under the IRA for 2020, House Bill 2023 and 2024, and it's extended out till 34. There's a two-tier. If you meet Energy Star version 3.2, you get $2,500, and if you meet the DOE Net Zero Ready checklist, you get $5,000. For anyone that does commercial or multifamily buildings, the 79D is $6 a square foot. That hasn't changed in a couple of years. There's also different organizations out there, like Mass CEC, the Clean Energy Center, Cape Light Compact, the DOE. They all have different programs for deep energy retrofit projects. The DOE, for anyone that was familiar maybe with the MVP program a couple of years ago, the DOE is going to come up with its own incentive program for low energy and all electric buildings. We think they're going to pay out about $15,000 a project. We'll know more probably July or August this year. And then always keep in mind that oil and propane industries don't pay into Mass Save, so there's no or very, very little rebate money. So if you're doing a mixed-use propane or oil house for heating, cooling, or hot water. So what's next? I only got like 2 slides left. So what's next? So, one question I always get is who's responsible for making sure that my house meets? It's the architect, it's me, it's the builder, it's the inspectors, it's everyone. We all need to, pay attention. Builders need to educate their subcontractors and make sure that their expectations are met. I think it's important. I think we all need to embrace this challenge. I think the goals of the state, are lofty. I think they're viable. I think, the climate goals, whether you believe in climate global change or not, it's written into the law, so we got to deal with it. It's important for builders to just learn how to remarket your homes. These are better homes. These are low energy homes. It's not Corey encounters anymore and hardwood floors. You got to educate home buyers in the efficiency side of it. 25 years ago, this HERS rater industry was developed by the mortgage industry to prove to homeowners that low energy homes were cheaper to live in, created more discretionary income. They could put someone in a bigger home because the home used less energy. Didn't really work because Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae got involved and were just firing out mortgages to everyone. So the code industry grabbed onto us, and it kind of embedded us into the 2006 IUCC, and it's been a journey ever since. And so I tell everyone all the time, you know what? There are going to be builders who are building now who aren't going to be building in a year from now or 2 years from now. It's just not the right fit. Guys aren't going to be able to figure it out. They're not going to be able to do it. So it's okay. Go open a pet shop. It's okay. Like I'm in my 3rd career, so you don't have to build forever. And it just may not be the right. I want to make it clear. It's okay if you just say I can't do this. It is what it is. So my last close, you know, we went through a pretty crazy couple of years. Getting to 52 isn't that big a deal. We've got a whole year to figure out how to get to 42. I truly believe it's unfair that the burden of saving this planet has been put on the shoulders of Massachusetts builders. I do. And I think what the most important part of it is what Andrew's going to start to go into now, is you guys need to understand what this HERS rating software does, and how it works, and what the trade-offs are, and what trade-offs work for you. Because when I do a preliminary model on a building off of plans, I'm using kind of anecdotal models that I know work, but they may not work for you as a builder. It's very easy for me to say, just close cell spray foam your whole house and put in a Coltech 0.8 window and a Cooper Hunter air source heat pump, and you'll pass. Every house will be in the 30s. It's a no-brainer. But I'm not sure you guys want to spend 100 grand more than you need to build this house. You know, and that's what we try to do. We're very cost conservative guy. I mean, we know, I built homes. I know what it's like. And we don't want to see you guys waste money. But we also want to make sure that the expectations of the homeowners and the architects and the builders are all met. So we're here to help. That's all we know, and we want to help in the best way we can to fit the way that you want to build houses. So our information here, we got cards and stuff on the table, and I am going to swap laptops, and Andrew's going to get into showing you guys what this software we use, the software we've been using for 20 years that we've never shared with builders and architects before, for probably no reason other than no one really cared. But I think it's important now. You may have to slide over to the, I think it's a different screen. There you go. Yes.
And it's coming up quick. Already.
Cool. So, I can see it up here, but not on my computer anymore, but that's fine. So, basically, this is a very simple house. Just to initially give you the idea of different scenarios in different ways depending on, you know, what your home buyer's expectations are, how you want to insulate the house. Like, for the most part, I've been meeting with our production builders over the last year, going through their specific models, figuring out financially what makes sense for them to get to HERS 42, HERS 45. One other key piece in the code change that I think is hugely significant to certain builders, maybe not to others, is any home that is 4,000 square feet or larger has only 2 paths for code compliance. One is 100% all electric. The other one is what they call DOER net zero, which means you could have gas, but you'll have to have solar on the roof to offset it to get your HERS score to a 0. Those are the only 2 paths for 4,000 square feet homes. Now, I don't know if any of you guys build a lot of those homes, but every builder I know that builds those style homes generally has a huge boiler, 4 or 5 different hydro air systems, 220-gallon indirect tanks that run off it, and that works really well for a 10,000, 5,000, 20,000 square foot home as far as the performance and what type of equipment people like to install. So doing a home like that in 100% all electric, there's a lot of hurdles. One is, what's the service size? I don't know if anyone's looked at what it costs to put in a 1,200 amp service, but I'm told it's like a $100,000 increase over an 800 amp service. I don't know, I've never built a house like that, but I've had builders tell me that. So in looking at those situations and figuring out what's the most logical path for an upcoming project is, in my opinion, more important than ever before. And that we generally tell most our builders now that if they have the ability after they get their conceptuals to have that first conversation with us, that's probably their best move. And the reason is I have a lot of homes that the builders, by the time they talk to me, the windows are already ordered. You know, it's already half of them installed and framed. And they were like, oh yeah, I want to go after this 15,000 all electric. So I'm like, all right, and I look at what they have, and because of the windows that are already in, I can't get them to 45. And the only way I could get them to 45 would be if they did 5 inches of closed cell in the walls, an R60 in the ceiling, and a number of these other things that they immediately tell me that'll add more than $50,000 to their budget of their home. So who cares about a $15,000 rebate if you have to spend $50,000 to get it? Doesn't make any sense. So that's why I say that, you know, cost engineering these projects right from the beginning is probably the most important thing to be able to continue building in the state of Massachusetts. This gets into a lot of these different equipment options. Real quick, just to kind of give everybody a quick overview of a very, let's call this a very basic home, right? And the reason there's like these 3 different little basic diagrams here is that this is could be 3 different ways that you insulate this building envelope. You know, traditionally it would be more like this, where you have an insulated basement ceiling, you have a flat ceiling to a vented attic, and then your exterior walls. You know, this would be the same, an unconditioned basement with a hot roof, where they spray foamed the ceiling. And then this would be a spray foamed roof line, where they also insulated the entire foundation. So, in getting to these HERS 42s and 45s, for every single model I've done so far, they've all needed a blower door down close to 1 air change an hour. So that is the biggest hurdle for a lot of our traditional builders. If you're a modular builder, or you generally always insulated your houses like this with blown-in cellulose and fiberglass everywhere else, I'll bet you any amount of money that you cannot build a house insulated like that and come in and do a blower door and get it under 1 air change an hour. There's just way too much air sealing to get it down that low. So, to all the builders we talk to, I pretty much give them 2 options. And this is what I say: talk to your insulation contractor, price it out, and then depending on what the home buyer's expectation is, that's where you start. And if you want a blower door that's at 1 air change an hour, the 2 ways I tell people is they either insulate it like this, where they spray the entire roof line. They could insulate the above grade walls with fiberglass, but even if the basement is not finished, they got to spray 2 to 3 inches of closed salt on the entire foundation. And what that does is they just increase the volume of their building, which in the world of air changes per hour means that a higher CFM of leakage is a lower air changes per hour. So in theory, this house could have the same CFM blower number of this, but it's down at like 1.5 air changes because the volume is double what the one that was insulated another way was. So basically when you're first looking at a lot of variables there. Is there going to be heating equipment in the attic? You know, that's number 1. If you're going all electric or all heat pumps, or even furnaces, a lot of times HVAC guys don't want to put, you know, a condensing system in an unconditioned attic due to the fear of the condensate line freezing, or the fact that that unit's probably not going to perform very well when it's trying to do air conditioning for the 2nd floor. It's 130 degrees in the attic, or opposite in the winter. So, again, depending on what the expectation is of the client, how you want to supply heating and cooling to the house, should create, you know, how and why you want to do this. The other way that you get to 1 air change an hour on the blower door is what Chris referenced earlier, is the aero barrier sealing. And that's where we have a lot of builders that insulate their house like this, but then after plaster, they then have aero barrier come in, which pressurizes the house, has little aerosolized sealants that looks like mist or fog that then gets pushed into any gap in the building envelope. The longer they run it, the tighter it seals the house. And they're able to see in real time how many CFM the house is leaking. They'll already have talked to the HERS rater before to find out what their target they need to get the house down to, and then seal it to 10% past whatever the target is. So now the builder is able to reach 1 air change or 1.5 air change on their traditionally insulated house without having to spray foam the roof line, without having to spray foam the foundation. So for the builders that do it that way, most of them tell me that they save between $10,000 or $20,000 off their insulation cost. To give you a rough idea, the aero barrier is usually like $1.25 to $1.50 per square foot of living space to seal the home down. And that's why, right from Jump Street, I tell builders, get your pricing, get your pricing, get your pricing, and then we can have a realistic conversation again. Because until you know what prices they get from their subs for all these different things, it's not really a real conversation. Which leads to the equipment. So they're pushing heavily toward these air source heat pumps, but now the modeling is so strict that I found in order to get to a HERS 45, that air source heat pump has to have an HSPF, which is the heating efficiency element, of an 11 or higher. So then that creates this whole conversation of builders talking to their HVAC guy. The HVAC guy, loves Mitsubishi. That's what he's been installing for the last 10 years. Who knows, they send him on a cruise every year, and that's why he loves Mitsubishi. And hey, that's fine. And I tell people, I don't care what equipment you put in, as long as it has the efficiency that'll get your house, to pass. And that can be a problem. I've had some HVAC guys, for me to put that equipment in that has an HSPF of an 11 or higher, it's going to cost them $15,000 on the equipment. So then I go, well, what equipment are we looking at? And blah, blah, blah. We start going down this road, and they're saying, look at this Mitsubishi equipment, and it's their elite model, and blah, blah, blah. And okay, I get it. That's maybe some expensive equipment. But then in doing that, I've also searched for a lot of builders and found other manufacturers that make equally, if not better, equipment from the efficiency standpoint that's a third of the cost. One of those ones is Cooper Hunter, which another HVAC guy on Cape turned me onto. And basically he was replacing a 2-ton ducted Mitsubishi system. So he went to the supply house, talked to him, found out some different options. He said, hey, they have one that's called Cooper Hunter, can you look that up? So I looked up that equipment, and they actually had some really great efficiencies. Their HSPFs were all like 11 or higher. They had units that worked down to negative 22 degrees ambient, where Mitsubishi's only go down to negative 15. I think it's a 7-year warranty. Mitsubishi maybe gives 10. But either way, the HVAC guy told me that that equipment was a third of the cost of the Mitsubishi equipment that he was buying from his supply house. So all of a sudden that made sense, and now they're putting those in, and the builder's happy. They didn't have an increase to their HVAC cost, and he's meeting the efficiencies. There's another company I found that's called Pioneer, that they sell direct to home buyers or builders from the Pioneer website, and because of that, it's significantly cheaper. So again, like a Pioneer unit I found, that's a 3-ton system, all centrally ducted, so it's a full-size air handler, traditional ductwork, comes with the backup electric coils for backup heat for inside the air handler, and the thermostat. All that equipment together was $3,300 total. That's pretty affordable. You go out and price out equipment, and it has an HSPF of 11, which is all I care about. So that's where, when you get into equipment, I tell people, like, talk to your HVAC guy. You got to find out what they're willing to install, what they think is good equipment, what they're willing to back up and say that they'll be, serviced, and then make sure it's in your price point, and then adjust accordingly. But the rule of thumb is HSPF 11 or higher for all heat pumps. If you want to do a gas house and get it to a HERS 42, equipment choices are very easy. It's a 96.5 efficient AFUE furnace or better, and for hot water, it's got to be a Navian. You might be able to get by with a State on demand, which is 95 efficient. The Renais, their best Renai is 93% efficient. The Navian's 96, and the Navian S is 97% efficient. So you need something right in that very upper echelon if you're going to stay with gas for hot water. Ventilation, ERVs or HRVs are now mandatory. And so this is this Cooper Hunter equipment. I'll just show you really quick. I don't know if anybody can read this, but depending on the size of the equipment, and this is what I found through all the manufacturers, that in Mitsubishi, I found they had some centrally ducted units that had a really good HSPF around 12, but it was only for their centrally ducted units that were 1 ton and 1.5 ton. When you got up to the 3 ton or bigger units, the HSPF was 9.5. Where if you put it in 9.5, you have 0 chance of getting to a 45. And that's just the reality that you'll have to put solar on the roof, closed cell spray from all the walls in order to make up for it. Basically, in a generic model, from going from an HSPF of 11 to just an HSPF of 10, you lose 3 HERS points, which is somewhat significant. And the reason I keep saying about having to price all this stuff out is because the other thing most of these homes have needed to get to HERS 45 or 42 is triple glazed windows. I have a lot of builders that tell me that's like a deal breaker for their budget because one, a lot of home buyers, unless there's someone who's into energy, don't see any value in that. They come in, the window looks the exact same as the double pane. So they're not like, oh, I'm so glad you put these triple pane windows in and I spent an extra 50 grand on it. They're like, what's this? I didn't get anything for this. So that's where I have some builders telling me that they'd rather go and put 8 solar panels on their roof because just by doing that, they get 5 HERS points through this program. The cost to do that, they tell me, is $10,000 to $12,000, and any buyer that comes in immediately sees value in those solar panels being on the roof. So they can justify charging the client $15,000 more for that, or justifying charging the client for triple glazed windows, or for like 5 inches of closed cell in their walls. The client doesn't see that. It's a very difficult thing for the builder to justify that cost to a buyer that doesn't have expectations of energy zero or extreme energy efficiency. Obviously, I think we all have certain customers that they want the best. You know, and I live on Cape, so I see a lot of those customers over the years that the budget isn't really an issue. They're building a 5,000 square foot home. They're telling the builder they want the best. They're worried about their finishes, their Viking range, countertops, whatever. Not worried about energy efficiency at all. But they want the best. So for them, great, give them the best. Closed cell spray foam the roof line. Give them whatever they want in the walls. Spray foam the foundation. But for other buyers that have a tight budget, you know, whatever, their expectations are very different. And for those people is where you really gotta, in my opinion, price it all out and know going in what's gonna get you to the finish line that meets their expectation. So the ERVs and the balanced ventilation, which is now a requirement in every single home as of January of this year. You know, most builders tell me that's a cost of $2,500 to $5,000 to buy the unit and have it installed fully ducted. And for like a really good full-size unit, that seems like, you know, reasonable cost depending on your relationship with your HVAC guy. Could be a drone, could be a Renew Air. Nowadays, there's a ton of companies that make ERVs and HRVs. But most of them are in that range, that the unit's around $1,000 and the install's a couple thousand on top of that. But, because I had a lot of builders inquiring, I found a unit that I think is a more affordable option for a builder that this meets their expectation. I don't know if you can see this there. This is a ductless ERV that has no ductwork. It's only $700. It gets installed in an exterior wall with just a 6-inch penetration, similar that you put like a range hood in. And the best benefit is that it only does 30 CFM, so it does a small amount of ventilation, but it only runs on 5 watts. And these ERVs and HRVs have a sensible heat recovery, which is basically the percentage of heat that it retains through its core. And this unit has an 88% sensible heat recovery, which again models exceptionally well. So for builders that are looking to just meet code, just meet this HERS 45, this is an extremely cost-effective option of having an ERV and helping meet the ventilation requirement and meet the HERS score without having to put a $3,000 or $4,000 ducted unit in the home.
Important to remember too, if you use this unit, the home is, a typical home is going to need more than 30 CFM of continuous ventilation to meet the ASHRAE 62.2. So you're still going to have to put a exhaust only fans, one of your bath fans on a 24-hour timer or a relative humidity sensor to get back to that, 85, 90 CFM.
So with the house being that much tighter, with the continuous turn rate of bath fan, where are you getting the makeup of it?
It'll still come in
Exactly.
through cracks in the house, and that's where the air comes in now. Like every time you flip on your bath fan, hood exhaust, anything that sends air out of the house, that exact same amount of air has to come into the house. And we've seen, this was years ago now, but these people built a SIP home on the vineyard that I was out at, and they just put it all together. They wanted me to do a blower door because they wanted to get it even tighter. So doing the blower door, and it starts off at 100 CFM. That's like a 2,500 square foot house. So I'm like, oh my God, you guys are fantastic. There's nothing to do here. I'm thinking, oh no, we want to get it tighter. So, all right, great, whatever. So I'm just running the blower door. They're running around, caulking, foam and stuff. And they got it down to like 52 CFM or something. And they were happy with that. So I was like, great. Back out there a few months later, and I was just curious about like, how do these fans all work? And so with the makeup air off for the hood exhaust, I try to turn the hood fan on. The fan's just glitching. It won't even really spin because the house is restricting it from it being able to. You open, then I open the window, it goes on like a hurricane. And that's the reason in the code that they have hood vents over 400 CFM need that mechanical makeup air. Is because now we're to the point that these homes are getting so tight that if that's not the case, the house will actually force the motor in that hood vent to burn out very quickly because it's restricting it so much. Plus, you also run the risk of like the house is so unbalanced that your kid's coming in from outside and the door gets slammed shut on them because somebody's cooking at the time that he opens the door. So, whatever, different issues, but this is one of the key pieces because now it's mandatory in every house. So finding one that from an energy model standpoint has a good watts to CFM ratio and a high sensible heat recovery. Those are the pieces that matter in the energy model. Any questions at this point about anything? So, these also come with a standard MERV 5 filter. You can upgrade to, I think, a MERV 14. But other than that, I have not found anything that's that affordable from an install and equipment standpoint that meets the ERV requirements. Hot water. So for these heat pump homes, they now have heat pump hot water tanks. It's tough when you wrap your head around the efficiencies of these equipment and how now they're like similar to dollar for dollar cost of say a Navian. It's 96% efficient, but gas is that these heat pumps are now like all over 350% efficient. So most of the manufacturers, Bradford White, A.O. Smith, their heat pumps are like 345% efficient. The Rheem models that you can get from Home Depot are like 375% efficient. I think the Rheem 80 gallons, 400% efficient. So again, you hear these percentages and it's like almost tough to wrap your head around. You're like, how the heck can something be more than 100% efficient? But it's that the watts these heat pumps are using are so low that the amount of energy that they're able to create from the air getting drawn into them is a multiplier to the amount of electricity that they're using. So that's how, with those super high efficiencies, that the cost for that heat pump is now similar to that of a 96 efficiency gas furnace. Basically, when we meet with builders and kind of start to go over their specific home, the window purchase, equipment purchases is basically what I tell people they should be looking at first. Getting their HVAC guideline, the window manufacturer, because some of our builders have found double pane windows that have like a U value of a 0.23 or a 0.24, and it has a solar heat gain of like a 0.30 or higher. That those windows for double pane are actually really decent, and I'm able to make their energy model work with those double pane windows. Other builders, especially some of these houses that have 80 windows or a large amount of glass and doors, just can't do it. So that type of project, they kind of need to know going in that if they're gonna have that many windows and doors, they need to buy triple pane windows, or they're gonna get halfway through the job and not really have a path to compliance, which is my biggest fear. Because we've had that happen in a handful of homes that were just trying to get the mass save incentive of $15,000 this year. They're like, I kind of outlined the stuff with them, gave them a broad scope, but then we get into their exact model, windows already purchased, certain things already in place that can't change, couldn't get their models there. So that way, you know, when it's just for an incentive, it's not the end of the world. When it's for code compliance, all of a sudden that could be kind of the end of the world for somebody. That's pretty much the broad strokes. Everything else gets much more into like a very specific per home situation. But basically, in order to keep, the last thing is that in order to keep, most of the builders I talk to, the one thing they all dread is going to R30 in the walls. They pretty much tell me, like, find anything that we can do that prevents us from needing to go R30 in the walls, just because that means like 4.5 to 5 inches of closed cell, which is extremely expensive right now, or framing your house in 2x8 or double studding the walls, which, again, unless someone's building a passive house, that's usually way out of the budget. As far as the aero bearing, like for our production builders, that a lot of them choose the aero barrier, whether it be just to meet code or to meet one of these newer incentives. One of the bigger benefits is we'll have the HERS rater come in directly after the seal, which happened right after plaster, and do their blower door at that stage. So that way they're able to get their blower door taken care of, so they're not sitting at the end waiting for a closing with their fingers crossed going, oh my God, I hope we pass. And then if they don't, it's like a meltdown because the people are moving in that weekend or the next week, and now what are we going to do? And it just becomes a situation that us as HERS raters and the builder, you don't really ever want to be in. I think that's the majority. Right?
Can you jump in the Ecotrope or just?
I can't open it because the internet connection is not good enough, unfortunately. I know. This was all stuff I just have on my laptop, but yeah, I can't unfortunately get into the Ecotrope model. That it says I'm connected to the Wi-Fi, but it's not a good enough connection to connect the Ecotrope, unfortunately. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so if you could back up a little more about renovations or additions on houses.
Yeah.
Because that's more of the projects.
Yeah, absolutely.
One
So
thing starting with a new house and making it comply,
Right.
but where are the thresholds?
yeah, the huge changes are two. One is when the town inspector, which a large part of that is his discretion or her discretion of whether they consider it to be a major renovation. A lot of inspectors, like, line of what they consider it is if it's over 50% of the house is being renovated, they'll consider it to be a major renovation. If it's considered to be a major renovation, you're required to get to either HERS 55 or HERS 52 for the whole house. The big issue is with the additions. Now the prescriptive R values are R60 in the ceilings, R30 in the walls. The window prescriptive U value went from 0.32 down to 0.30. So what that means is that if you're doing an addition that's under 1,000 square feet and you're bidding that to a customer, you should know going in that you're going to have to close cell all the walls and the ceilings. And that there's really no other way that you can get to those R values without it. And so you just go in knowing that's the case. If it's over 1,000 square feet is where you're not allowed to just do that addition anymore. You have to bring the rest of their existing house, including that new addition, up to a HERS 55 or a HERS 52.
So when you referenced a typical colonial built in the 80s, 90s, where is that number-wise?
Oh,
You're
okay.
starting-
Your starting point?
So hold on, 2x4 house with, let's call it like a 80 efficiency boiler, whatever, something like that.
That
Probably,
can be changed, but the insulation 90s.
yeah, probably a HERS 80 to 90. So like to get that house to a HERS 55, it would probably mean new windows, new heating equipment, new hot water equipment, very well might need to open all the walls and re-insulate. And that's where I feel like there's a lot of people that's not in the budget for an addition.
I probably have 30 or 40 projects in my office that started a year ago, and they've been waiting, you know, economically, rates went up, that might as well call them and tell them to stop right there.
Right.
Because-
Right. No, and that's what it's permits pulled after January of this year are now forced into those requirements. So that might be like, maybe they decide, oh, well, we were thinking of doing this 1,100 square foot addition, now they back it down to 950.
And it's 50% of the value of the home, 50% of the home.
50%
of the house.
House.
And that's just a renovation, which is a little different than the addition. So, and that's also the building inspector's discretion, in that they'll come out and they have to issue your permit based upon the plans you presented. They're gonna look at it and say, oh, you're demoing 80% of this house. I consider this to be a major renovation, which means technically when you pull your permit, you gotta give them a HERS report that shows a HERS 55 or a HERS 52 preliminarily, that say we would do from the plans. That's how you get your permit issued. And then in order for you to get sign off and occupancy, you have to have a final HERS report with all the proper testing that is a HERS 55 or 52 as
And
well.
that's just for the additions?
No, that'd be for the whole house. That's for a major renovation,
Major.
major renovation.
Yeah, you gotta think of it almost in terms of like how we do with the flood zone with a substantial improvement, you know?
Right.
You do over 50%, all of a sudden you trigger bringing the whole house into compliance for energy code, just like you do for flood code. You know, it's over 50% of the value, you know, or over 50% of the alteration of the foundation or something like that. You've got to bring it into flood zone compliance. This is going to be very similar with energy. You go over that 50% of renovation, you got to bring the whole house into compliance. And I've been, sorry, I don't want to.
No.
I think there's a, you know, obviously, like as builders, our initial thought immediately goes to, well, now we got to gut the whole house, we got to pad out the walls, we got to do all this other stuff, right? But I think what is important to realize too is that there's going to be a lot of, in response to these codes, there's going to be a lot of products and a lot of, you know, alternative design and materials. And I think that, you know, that's something to look out for too. You know, I see we've got some siding contractors here, or roofing contractors here. I'm sure they're going to be adding some exterior insulation options to put under, you know, siding, or, you know, under, you know, as like roof underlayment systems that have insulation incorporated into it, or doing a fiberglass, you know, insulation between the studs, and then doing a, you know, a solid layer of foam insulation over that, and then doing your sheetrock over that, you know. So there will be compliance pathways other than just like you said.
Absolutely.
You know, and I think that's one of the most important things going forward, is going to be that proper building planning, right? And sitting down with a HERS rater or an architect or a designer that really understands it, and you can come up with an exact plan so that, look, quite honestly, I don't want to be the guy at the end of the project when you're at a 56, you know, and you're supposed to be at a 42, and I'm like, I can't. We have grants, you know, that we get from the state for the town of Marshfield. I can't issue a certificate of occupancy on that. Like, I can't modify it. And so I don't want to be the person at the end of the job saying, you know, you got to figure something out and retrofit a new house, you know,
Right.
or, you know, essentially to come up with this compliance, you know. So the more upfront building planning that you can do, especially with the HVAC guys. I mean, right now, us getting manual J's from HVAC guys is like pulling teeth. It's so difficult to get that proper planning. And look, what we're asking for is like, size the equipment and show us that the layout is going to be balanced and appropriate to heat this house efficiently, and you're not going to, you know, waste energy, you're not going to waste heat. You're going to, like you said earlier, that was a really good point. The money's, the homeowner's getting what they paid for ultimately, you know. Like I went into a house the other day And this was in the attic, and it had the cellulose insulation, and so it was all their heat system was up there, they had the vents and everything, and it was all R6 insulation, you know, and so I'm like, that's gotta be R8 just by code compliance.
Right.
Just by code, it's gotta be R8. But now, this person's looking for their final inspection. And I'm like, you know, this was, and I go back and I look at the permit and I see him arguing with Annette about submitting a manual J and everything, and now we're at the end, and I'm like, you didn't insulate it properly. That's just a basic code requirement, but like, this is why we're asking for these details up front, just so that at the end of the problem, we're not a problem dealing with you guys. Like, we can just be like, awesome, you guys planned it right, you did it the way it was designed to, and now we're getting through, they can get their certificate of occupancy and move into the house with no issues. Like, that's the ideal thing. That's why we want to see the manual J. That's why we want to see what type of equipment when we ask for, you know, manufacturer specifications of what type of equipment. But that, when you get a HERS reader, all that stuff's going to be incorporated into what they're doing as far as the energy design of the house, because they will find out that equipment. They will help you size it. They will help you balance the system and do all of that for the HVAC guys. So I think it's going to be a valuable resource going forward with all this stuff. So.
Also about the renovations you were just
I'll get
mentioning.
you, don't.
Real quick is that, you know, and another strategy for, depending again on the customer's expectations is, hey, they want to renovate this house, but some people, we want to do a major renovation, but that means they just want to change their kitchen around, they want to change the bathrooms, they want to change maybe a few things about the layout. Well, you can very well do that without gutting the exterior walls. You know, you can gut interior walls, change the siding, all those things, and it not be a major renovation, because you're still keeping all the exterior walls as it was. You're just changing the flow of the house, the function, upgrading whatever appliances. Maybe they do want new heating equipment, which there are mass save incentives for. You know, you can do all that and it still not be a major renovation where you wouldn't need to meet any of those requirements. And in that case, any small areas of exterior wall that you open, all the code requires is you to fill the cavity. So you don't need to bring it up to an R30 or anything like that. You could just go R15 back in the 2x4 cavity. But that's why you got to be very smart about choosing what you're going to demo, what you're going to keep it as not a major.
It's more of the additions that I see as the big hit.
Mhm.
You have a simple ranch work the second floor,
Right.
you're gutting the whole house.
Right.
Oh, absolutely.
And this is another reason
Yeah.
we honestly would want guys to pull exploratory demo permits, right?
Mhm.
Don't get ahead of yourself.
Right.
Don't rip out too much. Don't go in and all of a sudden we find out that the whole house is gutted, and it's like we don't have a choice to help you out, you know? Like,
Right.
file
And it-
for an exploratory demo permit. Like, tell us what it is you're gonna take out. Be very explicit and do just that, and you won't have an issue.
Right.
Because that renovation up to 1,000 square feet, we can still do a res check. And there are some trade-off available in a res check. So, you know, you can go with a really good window and trade off that R60 back to a reasonable R38 or R49. Or, you know, you can get, there are some trade-offs available. You know, and there are renovations, I mean, we do a lot. And we see a lot. And I've seen plenty of home builders have come to me and say, you know, we want to do this to the house, and you know, they went the other direction, and we ended up going with a full HERS rating, and they ended up completely gutting the house. And you know, it just, you have to have the discussion with the homeowner, and there's some education on all sides that needs to happen. And it's not any of our choice. But we have to meet an expectation of the building code, and, you know, it is what it is.
Yeah, I'll say that the building officials around here and just in the state in general feel the same way you guys do, that this was really fair, not unfair, not having a concurrency period, essentially using this code change to be the concurrency period almost before
Right.
the new change, the
This whole year,
going
yeah.
over a year, yeah.
But what do you got?
Just on the 1,000 square feet addition, excuse me, maybe I missed this, but is that finished space?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, so the
So
condition
the
floor
classic
area.
like garage with a master above it, you're only
Just-
counting the master above it?
Yeah, exactly.
Correct, yep.
Yeah,
No garage space or any unfinished space would count toward it. Like, so technically, you were building a storage, like a
Right.
plane hangar or whatever.
But
You
is
technically
that-
don't need to meet any of the energy codes if it's not living space.
Say it's a $200,000 renovation with a garage with a room over it, and the house is worth, say assessed value is 215, you get over that 50%.
So it's not gonna be, so the
It's
value
not
is on the
value.
flood zone.
So as long as you're
Yeah,
under
the
a
val,
thousand
sorry, I was
square
just
feet.
using it as a,
Yeah.
as kind of an example. The like building value thing, that's just the flood zone stuff. This is gonna be, and this is where I was talking with Kevin the other day, where I'm not exactly sure how we're calculating, the 50% and of the level 3 alteration, like, because do you do square footage?
49%.
Do you do square footage of a room, right? So if, let's say a room, they're gonna, all right, well, we're gonna just do this wall, and their interior walls, and we're doing, we're gonna move those walls. Well, is that whole room being renovated? Do you consider that whole room being, all that floor space? Even though the 2 exterior walls aren't getting renovated, but is it, you're gonna rip out the ceiling, do a new coffered ceiling, knock out the wall, and expand the kitchen? Does that include that space that's not getting touched, even though that's an exterior wall? So, like, you could just do all interior renovations, not touch an exterior wall, but it's over 50% of the area of the house, you'd have to bring up the whole thing. That's where I want to get some clarification from the state on some of that stuff, and I don't think we've had that exact kind of clarification on that aspect of things. Now, any of you guys that have dealt with me in the flood zone and the 50% stuff, when you come at me with something that says 49.5%, I'm like, you're gonna approve every single cent of that 49.5% to me before I accept it, right? So it's probably gonna end up being a very similar situation here. It's gonna have to be very clearly defined of how much of a house you're gonna be remodeling or working before I can say, okay, yeah, you don't have to, meet the HERS pathway, or you can just go like a regular code compliance,
From your perspective, because you're talking about an R30 single cavity as opposed to like a 20+5, what has your experience been with trade-offs? So I'm from Goodrich Lumber. We've brought in, we've actually started stocking it.
Is it bar?
No, because it doesn't meet the density. We've gone with LP Nova Core
Okay.
because it's got a higher density of the foam, and it's a expanded styrene.
Is that the one you have in the office? I like that. What's the cost of that per sheet, roughly?
About $77.
Okay, that's awesome. That's a good.
So what we're trying to do is come up with mechanisms with, to not affect the framing of the project as much in that respect. So that, because a lot of the framing we're finding, especially with new construction, is subbed out. So now you don't have to try and communicate to the Brazilian crews or whoever that it's just a different sheathing, here's the fasteners you need, that compliance. But I guess from a trade-off on a HERS standpoint, on a new construction home.
That is a big impact.
Okay.
The continuous insulation, it's super helpful. I think it's a great thing. It's not always in every builder's budget. A lot of builders I talk to about it, it's the install is an issue too. A lot of them are doing zip bar. The issue they tell me, especially when you get into the 2-inch zip bar, you're using such long nailers and the hardware that they can't get the guys to line it up right and be hitting center
They
stud.
can't seem to find the stud that's
Right, and then
16 inches away from the other one that they just.
Right, a couple builders that they told me they have to sheathe the whole house first and then put the zip bar on top. So now you're like double sheathing it, which is, I don't know what that's got to cost.
To
a
eliminate a
fortune.
nailing pattern.
Right. So that is what other guys have told me, that guys drive the nails too hard into the green board, that then potentially water can get into them, so now it's not
Right.
giving you
Because
that.
the zip
Well,
is
that's
in a
why we went
self,
with the LP Nova Core, because
Right.
the,
Self-healing.
it's 25 PSI versus
Yeah.
15, so it's just, has so many other factors, but, because we were looking at, or I was looking at it in the aspect of, if you get those benefit trade-offs, does it give you more flexibility with your window choices?
Yeah.
And/or, so that's, again, we're all trying to still hit a number.
Right.
We're trying to.
it's all a numbers game, no doubt.
Well, and that's
No
why I
doubt.
like that, like whether it be, like, I'm just gonna say zip bar, because that's the name that's easy for me, but like in renovations, especially in like needing a major renovation to get it to HERS 55, 52, in my opinion, that's a great way to do it, especially if you're already having a plan to re-side the house, because the siding's in bad shape and the windows are old, so you're gonna be replacing the windows. Easy peasy, take the side nap, you already got the old either like plank boards or sheathing there, so you can put your zip bar or whatever
Sure.
right on top, easier install, put your new windows in. It was 2x4, now it's pretty close to traditional 2x6, so you can stick with regular windows and doors. And that's a pretty good way to do like what we consider to be like a super high-end energy retrofit of an existing 2x4 home. And that's, I think, a great way to do it. And they can just insulate the 2x4 cavities, keep most of the other parts as is, and that just upped the performance of that house significantly, in my opinion.
There's a lot of variables though.
So many variables.
Oh, yeah.
Electrical boxes.
Right, how you get it to line up with the roof, right?
No,
Oh,
absolutely,
yeah.
right.
A ton of variables.
Right, I mean, are you guys familiar with T-studs?
Yeah, well, I've seen them, but I.
We've seen them, well, we've seen a bunch of them. It's a great,
What do they cost? I can't get anyone to tell me what they cost.
We don't have,
We've
from
got
our
some-
standpoint, we don't have anybody in New England who distributor-wise, who stocks them.
So I talked to the company directly and they wouldn't give me a cost without, you know, it was like I was filling a credit app out and I just.
right, right, it's, I mean, it's such a great product.
How do you cut them? That was the other thing I was asking. My skilly's not gonna cut those.
Mm.
No, I think it will, no, it's a 2x4 on its
Yeah.
flat,
Yeah.
with a 2x3 on its angle, on its side,
Yeah. So I'm
connected
not
with
cutting-
1-inch dowel.
I'm not cutting them all off the stack. I'm not marking
Well,
eight of them at once.
oh, no.
Yeah, you have,
It's a pain
yeah,
in the ass.
Right.
It's-
right, chainsaw,
Yeah.
right, homesteaders.
But there's tons of like products too, depending on, that's why I tell people, it's like, hey, like we have some builders that hate spray foam. They believe in a vented roof. They think that it's gonna rot the house and all these things. And I say, I don't know, jury's not out yet. You know, and some people love spray foam, think it's the best idea ever. But, you know, I don't know, jury's not out yet. 20 years maybe we'll figure it out. So I try to tell people, you can do it either way. You can meet these requirements either way, but I try to let the builder decide or the homeowner decide which way that is. So it's not me making the decision for them to go hot roof. So God forbid their house does rot in 10 years, they're calling me going, why'd you make me do this?
Right.
And that's why, those are like personal beliefs in the construction industry. And that's why I say you can still stay true to whatever your personal beliefs are about construction and what you think are good or best practices and still meet these new energy code requirements.
I mean, I feel like the experts in the field should already know if the roofs are gonna rot out in 10 years.
Yeah, but when they put in urea formaldehyde insulation, it was the same, right?
Right.
Right.
Until it's tested for 20 years or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And a lot of it has to do with how these people are living in the home, how they're ventilating the home, are they ventilating the property like properly? I can't tell you how many homeowners were there, were doing the final as a HERS rater, and they're like, why is this fan always running? This thing's so stupid. It's that, you're like, oh, this is really critical, it's gonna get you.
They turn it off.
Right, they're like,
Yeah.
as soon as you leave, I'm shutting it off. I'm going, you do whatever
Which
you
is
want.
perfectly fine, because the following winter, they call us back
And they say, I got
to
a
find
roof
out
leak.
why my roof, they're like, oh my
I got
God,
a
we
roof
put our
leak.
Christmas ornaments away, and the inside of my roof is all ice. Like, I have ice dams. You're like, no, it's not ice dams. You gotta turn your bath fans on.
Right,
You're like, no, we run them for like 15 minutes.
yeah, it's all condensation.
I'm like, no. 22 hours.
Yeah.
22 hours, not 15
Every day,
minutes.
every day, yeah. In some of these homes, and that's what it is. It's so basically the humidity from the home's going to stack effect, leaks into their vented attic, and then as soon as that, let's call it 70-degree, 50% humidity air touches the underside of the sheathing or the nailers, turns to water. If it's cold enough, it freezes. So the ice just keeps accumulating on there, and they like go up in their attic for the first time, there's ice on the backside of the sheathing, and they think they have a roof leak. Hey, the one poor guy replaced his whole roof and tells me the story because he called his roofer, a roofer to come in and look at, because all the little nails sticking through had ice, a little piece of ice on the tip. So the guy goes in, oh man, you clearly didn't seal it the right way, this, that. The guy goes, gets a whole new roof. I'm like, I'm sorry to tell you, but there was no roof leak there, but I'm telling you.
You
this
really
is all
needed to insulate your attic hatch.
Right, that he needed to seal that top floor and ventilate the house properly, and that would have stopped right away. And those are those things that you just deal with, but a roofer sees it, and I guess sees it, I don't know if he saw it as an opportunity, or maybe that's what he really believed. But those things happen.
And these are things that are, you know, and I'm speaking from experience from when I was building houses, they're afterthoughts, right?
Mhm.
The venting of the roof, you know, of the attic space and all these things, like, it's not what your focus is when you're building the house. Like, you're dealing with a ton of other stuff. You're trying to pay the guys at the lumber yard, you're trying to get the money from them, you're trying to line everybody up, you're trying to do this stuff, and then it's like, oh crap, that's right, I gotta get up there and vent that bath fan that's been sitting up there in the attic for the last 4 months that nobody did, you know, or all these other things, and it becomes like you're the punch list, right?
Yeah.
All these things end up being the punch list items. They can't be the punch list items anymore, they've got to be the stuff that you plan for throughout the project.
So what's the stretch code now? Is there any difference anymore?
So, in a stretch code community, the only real difference in the building code is that you have to have a HERS rating on your house. There's no other compliance path.
You have no prescriptive path.
So it's called the Energy Rating Index.
Okay.
You have an ERI path in the building code. The ICC could not use the phrase a home energy rating because it's proprietary of ResNet. So they had to say that the only path to compliance is the Energy Rating Index. And then in the 780 CMR, there's a subsection, an amendment that says an Energy Rating Index in Massachusetts equals a HERS rating.
Yeah.
And then you have to go back and refer to R 402.2, the table.
What's your expected lead time to, from a HERS rating standpoint, because the demand's gonna go up. For you guys in the field, your HERS raters, you're gonna go from, you know, oh, we can get your paperwork in 2 weeks to it's 2 months out? Do you have any expectations?
Oh, we're fast,
No.
we're like, yeah, we have like a whole system between the office supporting path, and you
Yeah.
can get.
We got a
Preliminary, you're talking about a preliminary or a final?
Something for final.
Oh, for the final, so we'll turn the final around from the day the HERS rater is on site within 2 days, usually. But
Yeah.
the Final.
So our field raters, we have 9 field raters. Our fielders all have iPads. So depending upon the complexity of the house and how accurate it stayed from the preliminary to the final, a lot of the updates that need to be done to that model can be done at the site. The model saved, these are all in the cloud. So then it's just a quick QA by someone in the office. It gets uploaded to the state and to the ResNet registry, and the paperwork's produced and sent out. If you were in a bind and you needed your paperwork done that day or within 24 hours, we can do it. We have more
And
than
then what
enough.
about from a permitting process? All right, so on the
On
front
the, so on the
end,
front end, it takes about 4 days, 4 working days for us
Once
to
you have all the
demo.
data.
So you send me the plans, 4 days later, you should have the preliminary, the initial preliminary.
But just so
And you can
know.
use that to pull your permit.
Right.
But that may not be what we do,
Right.
Right.
right? We're just proving the house to get there.
It'll be like, we have a couple people in the office that they'll take the plans, they'll then put it in like that modeling that you just saw, that house that I had in the little 3D software, and from it, that gets entered into EcoTrope. Generally, it's her or Jenna that will then put in preliminary high-efficiency equipment. So it'll be like a generic 95 efficiency furnace and 92 efficiency tankless on-demand unit, whatever, 0.30, 0.30 windows, you know, all the generics, and as long as it gets to 55 or 52 with that, then they'll say, great, send it off to the builder, he uses that to pull his permit.
And
With
the other
the-
thing is important with that though, is if they are doing all their reports and their plans based off of kind of generic equipment that they know will meet it, that equipment has to get, you know, or better equipment has to get purchased and installed.
You can't
by
do
your
anything worse.
subcontractors,
And that's basically what we
So
send
as
all
soon
our
as they start,
builders.
oh, I got a better one, like you were saying earlier, my guy has this, I want to use this. Okay, that's fine. You got to make sure that it's going to meet the thing, and it should. You should probably, if you have a HERS rater, say, hey, my plumber or my HVAC guy wants to install this. You know, will this affect our design?
That's generally the most common misstep that we've seen over the years, where you'll have you know, Hers Radar will go out there to do the final on this house. The hot water tank hasn't been there since we've been out to the job site, and they didn't read the preliminary thing we sent them that said these are the minimum efficiencies of every piece of equipment. They're talking to their plumber, and they said, man, these people want to make sure they always have hot water. And he's like, oh, I got a tank for you. It's this commercial tank. Kicks ass.
80 gallon.
80 gallon, it's a banger. And you're like, oh. And you get out there, and that tank's installed, and you're like, man, that's 63% efficient. You're dead. You have no chance.
It's dead in the water.
There's
You
no
just jumped
blower
to a
door that'll make
63.
up for it. So now you're like 8 HERS points off of where they need to be. And there's like nothing to make that up except switching the tank out.
Pull that tank out,
And
put an
so
80 gallon heat pump in.
That's a real,
And it's a numbers game.
right, non-ideal
Right.
change at that point.
No, because you just went from a relatively high efficient gas tank to a super efficient electric tank that's gonna be an 80 gallon electric storage tank. Because it's not gonna, these houses don't always allow the heat pump mode to maintain, that's not all I mean, they can maintain the heat pump.
So with the push toward all electric, what's gonna happen when we can't get the services? As it is, we can't, you know. it's
Yeah,
a-
that's what it is.
You can't get your full 100 amp service
Yeah,
installed?
and that's
Not
not even,
that
I mean,
big.
that's fine, right now, that's a 5,000 square foot house, but soon enough, it's gonna be, you know, a reasonable sized house, and you can't even get them.
No doubt, I mean, I guess on that, good segue, any house 4,000 square feet or
Oh,
larger, you talk about this?
Yeah, mandatory electric.
You have to be all electric.
Yeah,
So you have to be looking at 300 amp services.
right.
So if you're building a 4,000 square foot, 445, 5,000 square foot house, it's gonna have a pool,
Right.
it's gonna have a cabana, it's gonna have a hot tub, it's gonna have 3 refrigerators.
And that's why I
You
builders
need
tell me
it.
they're
It's
looking
gonna have
to go
500
800
square
to
feet of
1200,
glazing on the back.
which is crazy.
Yeah, it's just, is anything being, you know, I realize it's a supply chain thing now, but it's still, I mean, the demand's gonna go way up for all these meters. It's tough to get a 200 amp meter socket
It's
now.
tough to get a meter now, just regardless,
Yeah,
you know?
And we were talking to Dave Comoletti, our wiring inspector, about some of these changes Monday night. And, you know, he flat out doesn't think that our infrastructure can handle a lot of these changes, you know, and it's gonna be very difficult over the next couple of years as these changes start to get made. The big thing, though, he did want to make sure everybody knew here was with that electric vehicle charging station requirement, that does just have to be basically a junction box with a plate, or a four-gang junction box with a plate, and then a space for a breaker labeled as future electric vehicle charger. And
40 amps in the panel, conduit to either the garage or outside, 2-ganger box, blank plate. That's it. I've talked to a bunch of
Don't even wire
And
electricians.
it doesn't have to be in any specific location, so I've gotten a lot of questions about, well, if it's in a flood zone, how are they gonna, you know, like, where are we gonna put it? Because it's gotta be, you know, 5 feet
Why are we-
off the air, 7 feet
Right.
off the air, how are you gonna?
That's
you
why
know?
we say, try to get it to the closest corner, closest to the driveway, or put it in the garage.
does that 40 amp factor into the home size the load size calculation?
It
though?
should.
Yeah, you gotta leave
Well,
40
so
amps
it doesn't
available.
matter, so what'd you save yourself?
Right.
A socket and a breaker?
Right,
Yes.
Right,
Right,
You still have.
40 feet of wire, that's what
Yeah.
you save yourself.
right.
And that's another 40 amp you have to factor in.
Yep,
Correct, yep.
yeah, yeah.
And so like my house all electric, I did 200 amp, and I did the detached garage in 2018, and that has a 100 amp sub panel. So depending on how you want to split it up, but most of them I think they can get by with 200 amps. It's not too good into the real big houses, and for sure when they have a pool.
It's with
and
the
all those
other
other
stuff.
things.
It's
Right.
the other stuff that people are gonna have.
Are you mapping out solar rating as well, as far as house orientation on the lot and then
Julie?
the area?
I mean, our architects, they should be. And, you know, solar orientation of the house is really, really important. You know, and typically you want your house to face the street. I don't want my house to face the street. I wanted my house to face south, which would have kinked it sideways, and it can be done. But, you know, you're still looking at setbacks and size of your lot, and sometimes if you solar orientate the house correctly, it's not gonna fit.
Yeah.
So your
Right.
typical neighborhood, you used to go down the street and all the front doors are facing the street. street side will now be facing in every single direction except for the street. Because as the neighborhood,
Yes.
the road turns, some houses will have the rear of the house facing.
Yep,
Yeah, but in 100 years, that'll be normal.
It'll be normal.
it will be.
But there's also, I mean, there are creative ways, Dick and Julie, to design a house so that,
Like the
that
Jetson, you
tree
just
and
lift it up
then
and
maybe,
put it in the house.
some architectural
Right.
design so that the main roof line or the main, exposed area is oriented south or southwest or whatever. And then, maybe the front or, have an architectural feature that addresses the kind of, the look of the house towards the front. I mean, look, I know it's gonna be tough, but that orienting, doing as much as you can to at least factor that into it, even if it's not gonna be perfect, just changing things slightly, a little degree
Right.
or two is gonna affect how much solar, heat gain you get from the orientation of it. So it
Depends
is an
where you are.
important
If you have a lot of tree coverage, that's not necessarily true.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Right.
true.
And that is,
For
and that
every
is,
situation
right.
is gonna be specific, and also what the homeowner's expectations are. Some people are like, they're hideous, I don't wanna own a house. All right, that's your choice, So then, they're not gonna get the 5 points to the rating, they're gonna have to do R30 in the walls and triple glazed windows or whatever, but that's their personal choice.
You know, one of the big factors here is the money. In 36 years of doing this, I've seen all the changes, and we all are sparked about when the changes come and the cost. This is a major cost increase, and it's gonna be cost prohibitive for a lot of people to do either a major renovation, stay in a home, or buy a brand new home, because the domino effect of cost is, we're talking big numbers here.
And a huge part of that is that, the assessment of the house, the value of that house. The metrics they use now are 20 years old. So you can put 14 PV, you put 14K of PV in your roof. The assessor's only gonna add $6,000 to the value of that house because of the PV, not the $34,000 it cost you to put it on. It should be $40,000 more to the value of the house, but it's only gonna be 6 because the metrics are that old.
It's a catch-22.
Right, so the
You
home,
assess it,
right,
it's in taxes.
and that's the problem. The home that you built, the 2,500 square foot home you built, under this new code, in the realty world, is compared to the 2,500 square foot house that was built 15 years ago, right down the street. 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, 2.5
In
baths,
terms of cost.
hardwood floor,
But they're very different.
immensely, 45% better different.
It's going to be especially difficult for us around here too, because some of the examples that Andrew was given earlier were like if you are doing a subdivision and you've got the same house and you are, building spec houses, right? That's not what we build around here. We build custom homes, like all of you guys that I know here as contractors build custom homes. And so there's no set design or compliance path based off of what that is. Each single house, you're gonna have to work with the customer, explain to them these things, explain to them, well, you might have to change the design here, you're gonna have to add this other thing if you want this in order to get to this pathway. And I know it's gonna be super difficult, and that's why we're trying to do stuff like this. I'm trying to, educate myself as much as I can so that, and most of you guys know this already, but, my door's open to bring your clients in and have a meeting with me so I can help you explain some of this stuff so it's not just completely on you, and kind of smooth the waters over, or kind of make it, if you need me to be a bad guy or whatever, let me know beforehand, you need me to do that and I'll do it. But, I'm there to help you guys explain this stuff and get it through, at the early stages, planning, because the more planning and kind of be on the same page at the beginning of the project, the easier it's gonna go for you, the customer, everything, as you go through the project and get to the end.
One other piece about this that I've been noticing, and I think it's kind of part of the agenda, I don't personally agree with it, but it seems like it's part of the agenda, is probably everybody else has noticed the huge electric rate increases we've seen over the last year and in a couple of months. It seemed pretty drastic to me what they've done for a monopoly. Is I think they raised it 60% where I live in November, and the January before that they raised it 30%. So if you put those percentages together from January to where we are now, the cost is more than double.
Well, then there's the entire conversation of how the electricity is generated and, you know, so you get, you know, go down the rabbit hole on all these issues because it's like, yeah, we're trying to improve this, but we don't have the infrastructure to do it, and how's the energy being generated anyway? Burning coal and fossil fuels and, you know, very little of what we consume here is actually generated by, you know, hydroelectric or wind, or, you know, we don't have a nuclear power plant anymore, so, you know, that's how we're getting our electricity, so there's gonna be all sorts of other infrastructure changes and larger changes that come behind this. And unfortunately, like you said, the easiest way to start it is to attack the homeowners market, you know, and the residential market, and to start that, because, like you said, retrofitting a skyscraper, that's just not gonna happen. You know, a lot of these bigger buildings and stuff, it's not gonna happen, but the one kind of easy target, the easy one to start on, the way to get kind of general compliance and acceptance of the movement is to go residential and have everybody get used to it that way.
And by, what I was getting at, by jacking up the electric price, what's that make more affordable? Solar on the roof. So that's what I personally believe is the kind of the whole movement of this, is that you drive solar with all the incentives they've been doing, and now the code changes, not solar, drive all electric with the code changes, and now you raise the rate, which means that if you're paying $1,000 or $800 a month for your electric bill, it doesn't take long to justify getting a solar system on there that now you're just paying $200 to pay off the solar system, and you get $800 of electric every month, which is how, with all the incentives, it worked. I had my solar put on 6 months ago, and it's kind of crazy. I get about $300 of electric I generate every month on average. And with the subsidies between the federal and the state, my monthly payment, and I own it, I'm not leasing it, financed over 25 years, is $69 a month. $0 up front, $0 down, they did everything. So that's why, in my opinion, especially I have a 100% electric house, it's like a no-brainer. I mean, from me making that decision, I saved $200 the first month and every month after that, and I arguably added 40 grand to the value of my house. So that's what I think is kind of driving what they really want, is they want everybody to be electrified and to be generating most of, or not a lot of, their electricity on the roof.
Are they gonna invent invisible solar panels soon, you think?
Right. It's funny, we joke all the time. You know, none of us in this room know how we're gonna be heating and cooling our houses 20 years from now. I mean, you assume it's gonna be heat pumps, but, I mean, is it gonna be a cold fusion cell the size of this bottle in our basement, and this is what produces all our power? I don't know.
There's still a program for new.
Solar, yeah, you get, I did mine last year, so I get 26% back from the federal government, then you get 6 cents per kilowatt that you generate from Massachusetts for 10 years. I believe the federal went down to 24% this year, but still pretty worthwhile.
But the net result of that is still it's gonna come from taxes, which is just not gonna be us on the backside.
Right.
That's where it's gonna come.
Oh, yeah, no, everything in this is figure eight.
But we do live in Massachusetts, mind you, we do live in Massachusetts.
So,
I'm looking at the project now, and we're talking about doing solar shingles. I'm just getting into it.
Yeah.
Do you have any information how they work?
I got some, not directly from the manufacturer. I've had a lot of people tell me that it's a great idea. They thought the technology was going to be further along than it has.
Yeah.
That it sounds like the downfall is the efficiency
Yeah.
of the shingles compared to the efficiency of some of these newer panels,
Yeah.
and then the cost to the roof.
Oh, we know it's expensive.
Yeah.
Right.
Look at the cost, and that's not the issue.
Right.
You want, this gentleman's all to the green.
There's still
But
some
we
concern.
would like it to look nice.
Right.
Yeah, right. There's still some concern about the microinverters for the solar shingles, and how many you really should be, you know, how many you should have in the same circuit. And when a circuit does go down, you don't know.
Yeah.
That's kind of the issue with solar shingles right now, is that.
To me, the issue is, you gotta have the right guy to
Yeah.
install them.
Yes.
You can
Yeah.
buy the best product.
Right.
But who's the best company? Because that's the guy I want.
Right.
And what's the lifespan on solar panels, right, it vary?
I think they guarantee them for 30 years.
30 years.
They add a 10-year warranty to your roof also. In my case, where you're financing them, you get and this is why it's a little more expensive total cost if you finance them, is because they give you maintenance, service, warranty of everything for 25 years. So that's why I don't have to put any money out. All I pay is my monthly payment. I'm like, sold. Good, put it in. And that's why when I heard all that, it kind of became a no-brainer.
I just had a question. I believe with the new energy code, structurally, all new roofs have to support solar. Is that right?
They just have to have, structurally they have to be able to support. But the code is that you have to have a certain amount of square footage
Okay.
designated for solar, with no penetration, so no sting pipes, no.
But structurally, it should just be the whole.
But technically, the
Yes,
engineer
we're
should
not-
have already looked at that and stamped something that meets the structural requirement that would support. It's usually, you're only seeing that with like an old house that has like a 2x4 truss or some weird
Weird
2x6
dimensional
traditionally
frame, yeah.
framed roof that doesn't meet today's structure by an engineering standpoint, and they make them sister the joists and stuff.
Yeah, collar ties. You see a lot where they come in and they put collar ties in just to.
I'm like 99% certain that the code requirements for roof framing, the current code requirements for roof framing will meet, the solar.
And it's more of an uplift.
Yeah.
That the real question is more of an uplift. You know, you're not adding any real weight. The panels don't weigh that much. So it's how much air is going to get in underneath that thing and it's going to lift off. Is your roof going to lift off?
No. Not a tie downs we have nowadays, though.
Yeah. We all.
But this, this all it all ties together too, right? Because I had a conversation with Kevin about this the other day, with the advent of new, structurally insulated panels and other things, that you can put on there. How does that incorporate with, our wind bracing codes and making sure that you have a continuous load path, and how does that incorporate? And so it's going to be something that the structural engineers are going to have to, look at and kind of, figure
Or
out.
it's held up too. The longer the screw, the bigger the outside, it's gonna come down sometime, right? Actually, more cladding, more product.
Right.
Even support from below.
Yep.
It's not going to be easy. I know it's not going to be easy. I built a house like 6 years ago in Falmouth. It had about, honestly, I think 7,000 square feet of conditioned space. Wow. And it had a 42 HERS rating, and the only way I got that was geothermal heat with electric backup heat in the hydroware, and then it was all electric, solar panels all over the roof, and it was all radiant heat, geothermal, and everything was high efficiency. And it was all closed cell foam, and the basement was all sprayed with closed cell foam, and under the slab was sprayed with closed cell foam, right? So that's the only way I was able to get that to a 42, literally. And so I know it's not going to be easy.
7,000 square foot has money.
Oh,
Yeah.
So they don't
Oh, no
really care.
doubt.
So does the lumber company, so we all lumber for that one.
Hey, 7,000 square foot house, that person's not really worried about money.
That's one other kind of modeling, I don't call it a trick, but something that seems advantageous in the models to what it used to be. It has to do with geothermal. And you just using the example of a water furnace. I don't know if any of you have heard of that company. But I took like a all-electric home that I was doing for a builder, very basic home, similar to what I showed earlier. That was a HERS 45 with an air source heat pump, low blower door, all those things. So I changed just the air source heat pump to a water furnace, and it picked up 6 HERS points, so it went down to a HERS 39. So I know that there is a 30% incentive that you get back right now for doing geothermal. So for maybe one of these larger 4,000, 5,000 square foot homes that have to go all electric, that may be a much more viable option, because one of how much it helps the rating, plus usually in homes like that, the people are already spending $50,000 or $100,000 on their HVAC already, so it's not a huge cost to do the wells and everything. But those 6 points at the end of it is pretty significant as far as how many that picks up. So from a modeling standpoint, that may make geothermal maybe more financially viable for certain projects that don't have a good path of getting to a HERS 42 or 45 without going triple glazed windows and all these other things.
I mean, there's also like Sandco, They make a hybrid, they make an air source heat pump domestic hot water system where the condenser looks exactly like a mini split condenser. And then inside the house, you just have an indirect storage tank, 50 gallons, 80 gallons, 120 gallons, whatever you want. They're a little more expensive, but unlike the hybrid heat pump, that traditional 50 or 80 gallon tank, this is a true heat pump, and the performance and the efficiencies are much higher, and you get a bigger bigger capacity. You know, the recovery is quicker.
Plus with the tank heat pumps as opposed to the one that have the units on the outside, the big issue, especially with Boston, Provincetown, is like these people build like 500 square foot units, sometimes 800 square foot units, and they have to be all electric.
There's nowhere to put it.
Yeah, and you can put it in a louvered closet, but they hear a fan running all the time, plus it makes the unit cold, which all of a sudden kind of is a huge issue. You're building a 30 or 100 unit building, and now you have all these complaints of this fan and people being cold. So the two solutions is they either duct the exhaust of these heat pumps to outside, which again, if it's a multi-family building, that's a lot of planning to do that, or you do the Senko units, where now they can put the heat pump unit on the roof, and now the indirect tank doesn't make the unit cold, and they don't hear a fan run. But cost difference, the 50 gallon regular heat pumps around $1,700, and those Senko units are around 4,000. So there's ways to do everything, but there are costs to doing it as well.
Yeah.
Where's all electricity coming from? Everything's gonna be electric, where's it coming from?
Clean Canadian hydro.
Oh, you think so? It's gonna run Massachusetts, right?
Well, no, we got a wind farm coming right off the coast, 10.8 megawatts. That's more than enough power, right? I mean, think of this, no jokes. So,
I'm not joking.
Pilgrim Power Plant shut down and was decommissioned, we didn't replace it with anything. Right? Its sister plant, Vermont Yankee, closed down, decommissioned, we didn't replace it with anything.
I know, I have a house right by there too.
Right? So, they were producing a lot of megawatts. Like, what happened? Like, we're not building that good a house.
Oh, they're
No,
putting
but-
solar on a lot more homes, which, just so everybody knows, if you're
Yeah.
not using your solar immediately, it gets sold to your neighbors and your meter spins backwards. That's how it works.
I was
So-
telling him
And
that
that-
it's gonna be a power plant.
Right,
Right.
but that's why they won't let you put more than 30 panels without a specialized permit. Because if your neighbors all have solar, they won't let you just throw 100
Right,
panels.
and our grid, remember, we said earlier, our grid isn't designed to go both ways.
Right.
Our grid was designed for power to come from the plant and go to a house, not back out on the grid. It's not designed to do that. It'll do it just through, basic electrical building science. It'll do that, but it's not designed to do that.
But that's what then the utility company sells your over generation to your neighbors at regular rate. So at the end of the day, they somehow make a better profit margin off that, and you're still getting your credits, you're getting, the meter does spin backwards. But it somehow works out better for them because when they send the power through the grid, they lose like 2/3 of it transmitting it through the grid. So that's, I believe, why they want everyone to have solar. So that not only are they having to generate less to meet everybody's full usage.
Well, they get a tax benefit
Oh, so,
for processing
I'm sure.
renewable.
right, and eventually Eversource and National Grid want to become
We're putting,
maintenance.
we were approved for a 400 kilowatt system, and it was downgraded by Eversource to 279.
Mm.
And not for line capacity,
Right.
is that they got the right
Transformer.
to deny anything over 280. No, what transformer?
Right, they didn't want to upgrade the transformer?
They got
That's usually-
permission
that's
with the
usually
extension of the tax credit to put a provision in there that they have the right to deny any producer over 280 kilowatts,
Right.
180,000. So that's why my system was designed, to your point before, 279.
Right,
And I
right,
got rubber stamp.
right.
It's that figure eight, always comes back to the
It's
bottom.
always that figure eight. Yep.
What
Yeah.
happens in like nor'easters when the power goes out and you don't have a gas backup
Well,
generator?
you can do that.
Oh, so that's an exemption.
Right.
So
You can
in
do a
any,
propane generator as an
yeah,
exemption.
any new build you can install a propane backup generator. That propane just can't funnel through the house. So you can put a tank
Until
and
after.
the Generac over
Right,
top.
right.
Right, exactly. Once someone leaves, then you put in your gas fireplace and you run the propane and you put in your stove.
Until you sell your home.
Dryer, yeah.
Until you get until you go to sell your house.
Until you go to sell your house and then you're in the same boat.
So people will be
Right, where you gotta
able to
take it
have
off.
fireplaces either up here?
I mean, you can do it, that's mainly for this Mass Save $15,000 incentive that they're giving people right now. As far as code, like coming next year and this year, it's, the all-electric just has to do with heating and hot water equipment. You could still have gas for your fireplace, cooktop, generator. You just won't get the $15,000 from Mass Save if you run gas to the house or have more than a propane generator.
So if you want to have a boiler to run, say like under slab radiant heat in the garage, non-living space, is that allowed under the code, or? That's a pretty common setup that
Right.
goes in now, you know?
I mean, I guess from the aspect that it wouldn't be much different than having like a gas heater, like
Yeah,
a Modine heater in your corner. So it wouldn't be
It ends up-
energy model.
Yeah, it falls
So,
outside
like-
the scope. It falls outside the scope of the energy model.
So technically, it wouldn't matter to us. As long as it wasn't, I guess, connected to the boiler that's doing the heat for the house.
I think literally the only requirement for building code at that point is that you have a vapor barrier under the slab if you're
Right.
going to heat the garage. I think that's the only thing.
Yeah. Cool.
Any other questions?
Good.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate everybody coming today. I want to thank Andrew and Chris and Julie for helping to organize this and put it together. You know, like I said, we're here to help navigate this. We're navigating it ourselves. And look, I've been in your shoes. I know that it's frustrating when these code changes come up, especially the way in which they did this one. So any questions you guys have, please feel free to come in, talk to me, talk to Dave, talk to Casey. We'll put you in touch with some of these folks and try to help you guys get this one figured out. So appreciate it. Thanks for everybody for coming.
One last little thing I'll point out is that for most of our builders that we've been dealing with over this last year, we have maybe 400 different homes that they're doing all electric HERS 45 this year to get the incentive for one part, and a lot of the builders also want to get all their subs up to speed and being comfortable hitting what a lot of these new standards are. So for most of those builders, their true numbers now that they've finished a number of their homes, again, these are relatively normal homes, not these 10,000 square foot homes, that they're able to meet this HERS 45 and get all the incentives for under 15,000 cost increase. So that's, in my opinion, what it's all about, and that's where it's like getting the right heat pump equipment that's not going to cost a ton more than the furnaces we were using, all those little things and getting those price points that it is, in my opinion, very doable on a basic 2,000, 2,500 square foot home, where the incentive will at least pay for the improvements as of right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.